This lesson is going to be about Cloud Identity and Access Management, or Cloud IAM. It is not the most exciting topic in Google Cloud. It's not the one that people necessarily search for tutorials on the most, but it is one of the most important. And the reason for that is that it kind of underpins everything else, right? IAM basically determines who has what access to which resources in Google Cloud. And so aside from code errors, programming errors, probably the most important, most common reason why things don't work in Google Cloud, if they don't work, comes down to permissions errors. And even aside from permissions errors, you have the question of whether you're giving an account too many permissions. You have to be thinking about that at all times in GCP. So understanding how IAM works and being able to actually use it in practice is often the thing that differentiates people who can really use Google Cloud in the real world from those who don't. I remember, on projects that I was on, this was something we ran into time and time again, permissions issues, and also, people getting stuck or blocked on their work just because they did not understand how Cloud IAM worked. So I'm going to go through some of that with you today, so you at least can get a sense of how it actually works in the console and in the G-Cloud commands that are relevant for IAM permissions. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the IAM and admin page in console. So if you just type in IAM, you'll see it pop up, and you can actually click on IAM or IAM and admin, and it'll bring you to the same place. And here you would see a list of the principals in your project and the roles that they've been assigned. And right now I only have two because this is a new project. You can see my email address that I am using with these tutorials here, and you can see that I am the owner of this project. And then you can also see up here another principal that looks very different from my email address, and that is a service account. This is the Compute Engine default service account, and it has the editor role. Now, both the owner role and the editor role are what's called basic roles. There are three basic roles in GCP: owner, editor, and viewer. And these are applied at the project level, and they actually include a massive number of permissions. I mean, you can see here on the right that I have over 12,000 permissions assigned to my account because I have the owner role. And for the Compute Engine default service account, the editor role would probably grant it, somewhere on the order of thousands as well. In practice, that is usually too many permissions, and it does not follow what we call the principle of least privilege, which requires you, or at least suggests strongly, that you only grant the exact number of permissions and types of permissions that a principal needs to do its work. Nothing more, nothing less. It is usually something that serves as a North Star for people, for teams. It is rarely adhered to strictly in practice, but it is an ideal to strive for, because the further away you are from that, the greater the security risk if any of your accounts are compromised. All right. Now, if I check this box up here, include Google provided role grants, you'll see a whole bunch of other principles pop up here. And these are Google managed service accounts. They kind of work behind the scenes. They are often called service agents. And essentially, they are used to do their work kind of on your behalf when you use certain services. These are different from service accounts that you would create if you went to service accounts on the left here and you decided to create a service account, which we could do. But Google managed service accounts are managed by Google. User managed service accounts are managed by you. So that is a distinction that you should know about. And even if you don't see the service accounts listed here, because this is unchecked, you should know that there are many service accounts working in the background to enable your use of different services, and Google manages those. All right, so now I'm going to show you what it's like to grant access to a new user. So I'm going to click Grant Access here, and I'm going to type in an email address into New Principles, and I'm just going to use my GCP Study Hub email address here. And then this is the part where we assign roles. And you can see here that there are many, many services listed, and we have the basic roles here. There are actually 4 basic roles. So Google added a browser role, which I think is even more constrained in terms of its access compared to the viewer role. So previously, when I first learned GCP, there was only viewer, editor, and owner. But actually, yes, Google added the browser role as a basic role as well. So we have basic roles, which, rarely do you want to use except if you really need to out of convenience. And then we have predefined roles, which are all of these listed down here under by product or service. So if I scroll down to Cloud Composer, for example, and I give this account Composer user, that would be what's called a predefined role. This is a role that is not quite as narrowly defined as, for example, a custom role would be, but it is more narrowly defined than a basic role. And a basic role is the role, again, that is managed by Google. It is at the project level. It has thousands and thousands of permissions. A predefined role is kind of in the middle, and it is geared toward the specific permissions needed for common job families, job functions, such as data analysts or data engineers or developers. In the case of Composer, if someone was actually trying to develop on Cloud Composer, they would probably be given the Composer user role if they were an engineer working on Cloud Composer, right? And then on the other side of predefined roles are custom roles, and custom roles are basically collections of very specific permissions that we set and we manage that Google does not manage. So Google manages predefined roles and basic roles, and custom roles, if we were to set them up, would be managed by us and allow for that really specific granularity. So let's say I give this account, which is, again, my account. It's a different account from the one that I'm logged into, though. The Composer user role, let's say I'll give it, BigQuery data editor. And let's say I'll give it Cloud Run, developer. Okay. And let's say on the project, let's give, as a basic role, the viewer role, so that this person can see everything in the project, but they can only modify resources in Composer, BigQuery, and Cloud Run. Okay. So now we've updated the IAM policy, and we can see another principal listed here with the roles that we granted it. Now let's create a custom role. To create a custom role, we can click on Roles here on the left. And we can see all of the roles that are actually available already. These are the predefined roles. And we can create our own role. And this would be a custom role that we create. So let's say that I want a very specific set of permissions to be granted to someone. Let's say I only want them to be able to list compute engine VMs and nothing else. No creating, no deleting, no reading disks, no seeing network information, no doing anything else with any other services. So what I can do here is I can type in VM lister and only allows someone to list VMs. As the ID, I can call this VM lister. And role launch stage, I'll just make this alpha. And for added permissions, I will put in compute. Actually, let me show you here. These are all of the very specific permissions that, when grouped together, make up the larger roles that we have been talking about. So when we saw that the basic roles on the project had thousands of permissions, these were the permissions that comprised those basic roles. When we give a predefined role to someone, those predefined roles also contain dozens or hundreds of permissions, of these very specific permissions. So let's find the one that we want, which is compute.instances.list. Here we go. So this is one permission that we're going to add to this custom role. I'm going to check this and I'm going to add it. So now if we create this role, then we can use this and we can add it to any principal. We can add it to a service account. We can add it to a user account. And again, here are the predefined roles down here. And then here is our custom role that we just created. That's kind of cool. We can create our own roles with exactly the permissions that we want, right? So if we go back to IAM, we can grant this to any of the principals here or to a new principal. So I could, for example, grant access to, let's see, a different GCP Study Hub 2 at gmail.com. And I can go to custom and I can give it VM lister, right? So pretty straightforward. Let's say that the person with this email address, the person represented by this email address, is someone who just needs to be aware of the VMs that we have in our project and nothing more, right? Now, we can do this as well from the command line. And so I'm going to show you a few of these commands. One of them is gcloud projects get IAM policy, and then we are just going to type in our project. And so this is going to bring up the data that we just looked at in the console, right? So that exact same data. So again, we have all of the principals here and their respective roles, right? And if we look, we can see that we have the account that we gave the viewer role. We also gave it the Cloud Run developer role. I have the owner role, so this is exactly what we saw before. And similarly, we can add, we can grant access through gcloud as well. So gcloud projects add IAM policy binding. Actually, I didn't give it the proper flag. Okay. All right, so now we have given, let's see, Study Hub 2. GCP Study Hub 2. And where is GCP Study Hub 2? All right. GCP Study Hub 2 at gmail.com with the Cloud Run Invoker role. The Cloud Run Invoker role would allow you to actually invoke the endpoints of a Cloud Run service. Now, similarly, from the command line, you can also inspect the individual permissions that make up a role. So I can type gcloud IAM roles describe roles run.developer. And these are all of the permissions that make up the Cloud Run developer role. So again, this is one predefined role. And look, it's got dozens of permissions. So you really do have to be careful with the number of roles that you give someone. So I can see that it allows for basically all the permissions on services, creating them, deleting them, listing them, getting the IAM policy around them. It allows for permissions on, revisions in Cloud Run. It allows for, to look at the configurations. So I can see everything that it allows, right? It also allows you, to see the results of Cloud Recommender when applied to Cloud Run services. That's interesting. Anyway, if I want to see exactly what a role would grant someone, if they request it, for example, I can run this command with that role specified, and I can see what those permissions are. Something to note here is policy inheritance and the fact that permissions are additive. So this kind of trips people up. Essentially, IAM policies can be set at 4 different levels, right? So you've got the organization level, the folder level, the project level, and the resource level, the service level. So the organization level is if you have an organization set up in Google Cloud in your resource hierarchy. So that's at the very top, right? If you are, for example, the admin of your organization, then you have administrative privileges on everything in the organization, all of the projects, all of the folders. Within each organization, there can be multiple folders in order to organize the many projects that you might have. So for example, a different team or department might have their own folder within the organization. So the head of that department, or at least the technical head, might have, admin privileges on that folder. And then you have projects within folders potentially. If you do not have an organization set up, then project would probably be the highest level. It actually would be the highest level because you can't have folders without an organization. So right now we do not have our project in an organization. And so we just have roles and permissions at the project level. And then within the projects, we have permissions that can be applied to specific services. And so just know that there are different levels that you can apply permissions to. So the console here in IAM and when we run gcloud commands sometimes shows permissions as inherited. And that means essentially that someone has access to a resource, including potentially a project, because of permissions that they were granted in a level higher up. And another thing to note is that permissions are only additive at the lower levels, right? So if someone has access to a project because of some role they were given at the organization level or the folder level, I cannot deny them access to that project at the project level. They are only additive. I would need to go to the organization level and I would need to change their permissions there. Or I would need to take away their permissions and only grant their permissions at the project levels, whatever access they needed at the project level. So it is only, it's only additive. And another way to think about this, and this was actually a question on a Google Cloud exam at one point, is that the total permissions that any one principal has is the union of their permissions across all of the resources within an organization. And so that's just another way of saying basically that it is, additive. And this is one of the reasons why people often using GCP have over-permissioned projects, because it's super convenient to just go to a folder or go to an organization and grant someone, like the editor role, for example. Or even within a project, instead of granting them the very specific, predefined roles for specific services, they grant them a project level basic role because it's convenient. And then they have access to way more than they should. They have access to, more projects than they should. They have editor access to the entire organization, if it was granted at that level. So let's say that I want to revoke a role. Well, what I can do here is I can just, I can go here and I can delete the role that I granted gcpstudyhub2@gmail.com. And let's see. Okay, so I see I gave it the Cloud Run Invoker role through the command line, and so this had not updated. So let's actually refresh this so we can see both Cloud Run Invoker and VM Listener or Lister. And now I'm going to delete VM Lister, which was the custom role that we had created. So that's how you remove the roles. And then what I can do is from the command line, I can also remove access for someone. So I can gcloud projects remove IAM policy binding Office 412120. All right, so now if we refresh this, you'll see that viewer has been removed here. So as an introduction, I hope this was helpful. In the real world, at least in production, if you're serious about the security of your environment, you would pay attention to a few things here. One, you would pretty much never use basic roles. I don't have data in here. I don't have apps running in this project, so it's really not that big of a deal that I just have owner and I have editor for my Compute Engine service account. But you would ideally, especially if you have a team that can kind of figure this out together, you would make sure that each account is following the principle of least privilege, where they only have the permissions that are required for what they need to do and nothing more. And then you would audit this regularly, right? So sometimes there is literally someone whose job it is to stay on top of IAM and just staying up to date on what the roles are, what the permissions are, and being able to develop an IAM policy for the project or for different levels of the organization based on that is itself sometimes a very arduous and gargantuan task. So the hardest part in these scenarios is often just the actual discipline of staying on top of it. We're going to go over a bit more about IAM in the coming lessons. And so we'll go into some stuff that we didn't cover here, like service accounts and workload identity and stuff like that.